Interesting story coming to us now from the New York. Turn back to the automakers now. Another big story of the day. Chrysler could be just days away from bankruptcy with just a week to go before the government's deadline. The Chapter 11 filing could come as soon as next week. Even if Chrysler reaches a deal with its lenders, as we've been telling you about all this week, it could still file, and that would allow Fiat to pick and choose which parts of Chrysler it actually wants. In the meantime, Fiat also reportedly in talks with GM about teaming up in Europe and potentially in Latin America, a day after Fiat agreed to buy a stake in GM's Opel unit in Germany. So Fiat pretty busy these days.
Absolutely. Let's get an instant audit this morning. John Giamavo's with us from Edmunds.com, auto analyst. Good to see you, John, and thanks for coming in to talk about this. When this idea, does it make sense to you that we would have a bankruptcy filing from Chrysler no matter what?
I think when we've been talking about the imminent bankruptcy from Chrysler, I think we know that in the automotive industry to put together a deal with Fiat and to come up with it within this short period of time, I think we all know that the automotive industry is not exactly jackrabbits to put something like this together. So
well,
I think
they did it in banking, and look how great that's worked out for Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. They did that in a day, no problem.
Exactly. Yep. But I think we'll see very shortly. These next few days will be real interesting with what happens with Chrysler and again with General Motors also.
Okay, who are these Fiat guys? Because supposedly, I mean, do they have the cash, first of all, to actually be aggressive bidders, both with GM and Chrysler? And how did we even get GM into the mix when we thought that they were going for Chrysler? Who are these Fiat people?
I don't know exactly, but it looks like we do have a little bit of a love triangle going on right now as bankruptcy looms.
Right?
Yeah, it's funny. Strange bedfellows, how all this is developing.
Exactly.
How do you think it's going to play out?
We always look at Edmunds, we can see what purchase intent is and what consideration is, and we do finally, people have been painting with kind of a broad brush since talk of bankruptcy has been out there that, hey, consumers aren't going to want to buy particular products with bankruptcy looming. It hasn't been that stark up until this point. So right now we are starting to see Chrysler purchase intent and consideration starting to suffer a bit.
Really? So now people aren't buying. Then now people are saying, all right, this is I don't want to get involved in this. Looks like bankruptcy, and you're really starting to affect the sales. When did that start to happen dramatically?
We track it at Edmunds on a week-to-week basis, and I would say just over the last couple of weeks, since this looming deadline comes, that's when it's becoming a little more evident.
That's interesting because the AutoNation CEO Mike Jackson said just yesterday that first quarter is going to be the bottom for the auto market, and the downward spiral has stopped. But apparently, you're maybe seeing some more of that downward spiral.
I don't entirely disagree with that because we actually are a little more forward-looking, and we've actually seen an uptick on Edmunds.com recently, which will tend to translate into showroom traffic going forward. But just specifically in terms of purchase intent and with regard to its relation to the bankruptcy, we have seen a little bit of that trending.
Interesting how those two things will play out.
Very interesting.
Mind,
and a lot of that might depend on how quickly they can get this whole thing figured out in bankruptcy and get in and out of it if that's the route they go down. Anyway, it is now, what, 11 past the hour. So let's get back over to Ashley in London. Knows anything?
Well, Chrysler could be just days away from bankruptcy, and with just a week to go before the government's deadline, the Chapter 11 filing could come as soon as next week. Even if Chrysler reaches a deal with its lenders, it could still file. You see the deadline looming ahead, and that would allow Fiat to pick and choose which parts of Chrysler it actually wants. In the meantime, Fiat also reportedly in talks with GM about teaming up in Europe and Latin America, for example. This just a day after Fiat agreed to buy a stake in GM's Opel unit in Germany. Well, this morning we're also going to get a status update as well on Ford, the one U.S. automaker not fighting for its life, or maybe not fighting at least for government money. Even so, Ford is expected to post a loss of about $1.23 per share. Last year, Ford lost nearly $15 billion, but some of these losses might be overshadowed by just how much money the company has. How much cash does it have? Its cash burn rate, how quickly it's spending money, is expected to be down from last year when it went through about $21 billion. If it's down, that would be a good sign. It would probably be something that Liz Clayman is going to ask Alan Mulally about a little later on today. She's going to have an interview with the CEO of Ford, 12:30 Eastern Time. You don't want to miss that.
No, we look forward to that. But first, we'll have to get through the earnings. John Giamavo is with us from Edmunds.com this morning on an instant audit. What do you think, John? So the Alan Mulally would obviously tell you that Ford got out ahead of this and positioned themselves better than Chrysler and/or General Motors. However, losses still losing money. What's your perception of what's happening at Ford?
Well, they have made it clear, going forward, that they do have enough money to weather the storm. At Edmunds.com, we kind of look at from a purchase standpoint where Ford's looking, and they are looking.
You told us earlier this hour, it's just just point out for context that the Chrysler purchases are really down with people thinking about the possibility of a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
What about Ford?
Ford seems to be, as far as purchase intent and consideration goes, within the domestic sector, they seem to be starting to excel. And even overall, we're seeing them not lagging along with the other domestics. We see them actually making some inroads with some of the imports.
So if people have to pick and choose, what you're saying is they're going to pick a car company they don't have concern about.
Sure.
Well, if you have someone who's predisposed to stay domestic, if they start to get a discomfort with a GM or a Chrysler, they're going to lean towards Ford.
The issue with Ford down the line may be, and some people have written stories about this, if GM and or Chrysler is able to go through a bankruptcy and it's supported by the government and they come out hypothetically leaner and meaner, does Ford, even though it's executed better to this point, get hurt by the fact that they didn't take the government money and then, you know, they're at a competitive disadvantage 6 months or a year from now?
I think that's kind of looking, a little bit too further for as far as purchase intent goes, because we're not there yet. So, but I would say, as long as the other two come out leaner and meaner, I think that competition will start to gain up again.
Yeah, good for everybody at the end of the day. All right, John, appreciate that. Let's get back over to Ashley now in London.
All right, thank you very much.
Some breaking news on Xerox earnings just out. Just a quick alert here, 5 cents a share. The expectation was 4 cents. That 5 cents does include items. We'll look down and see if there's anything else you should be worried about there. For the second quarter, they're looking at between 10 and 12 cents, and the street's at 14, so they might be a little light. Xerox over that 1 year is down to almost 60%.
All right, stock features a little change this morning as investors await some details on these stress tests and even more earnings. We expect to hear from Ford as well. Ashley's joining us in London. We also have Tim Spiess here and John Giammalvo from Edmunds.com to talk a little bit more about the auto sector and everything else going on with this market.
Plenty going on about this market. So, Tim, why don't we start with you just on the stock market for what it's worth, heading into a Friday into the new week next week. Where are you, in your estimation of where the market is right now? What stood out this week to you?
Well, I think what stood out is the bank's stress test news. I think that's going to be the big news today. We're going to see earnings report, as you just cited. 3M, which we didn't talk about yet, I mean, the issue there will be investors looking to additional cost savings because it looks like they've really wrung everything out of what they're able to do, and then Amazon will be reporting.
You think the stress tests are really going to spook us here, or not really? When we had the Pandit report at the Post that he might be out, and what do you think of what's going on there so far?
Well, today we're supposedly only going to be told what the attributes were that were used to analyze the balance sheets and the P&Ls. I think it's going to be a huge issue as far as how the market reacts and what we're told as far as controlled information.
When we're told it, how we're told it.
And John, you have such a great insight onto the consumer. And just curious, as we've been hearing more, for example, you have like a deadline. We're all about these stress tests. It's going to be this deadline and then next week. Do you actually see that type of intersection with, no pun intended, with car buying? For example, you see all this kind of ramp up to certain days, the president talking about the economy. Do you see, because you look at it week to week, that consumers feel differently about buying week to week because maybe because of some of that news?
We do track it week to week at Edmunds. However, it's not as drastic as you might see in the financial markets. But I'm interested to see how Ford does and see if they've been able to capture in the showroom some of the increase in purchase intent and consideration that we've seen on the website. Because
they're taking big market share, right? And we're leading up to the Ford report, by the way, in the next, you would think, 5 minutes or so. They're taking a lot of market share. Ford, aren't they? I mean, is that what you see?
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it's a lot of it, but they are trending definitely ahead of the pack.
Yeah, and that's just by default, if nothing else. But is there anything they're doing specifically with the models and the cars? I mean, you guys look at what kind of cars they're making. Are they ahead of the pack there, or had all things been equal, maybe would they be behind them?
Well, they've got some real good news. The Ford Fusion Hybrid that's come out has gotten some real good reviews right out of the box, and I think that's going to be a real winner for them.
But credit, what about credit? I mean, you look at consumer intent to purchase, right? But that's like mortgage applications. You don't know if they're actually going to do it or they're going to pull the trigger, right? So what about that?
Well, that is the 800-pound gorilla in the showroom. Is purchase intent and consideration is great, but when the people show up in the showroom, if they're not able to get them bought, as we say in the car business, then it's all out the window at that point.
John, what's your sense? I mean, I know that Ford pulled down the remaining, its remaining line.
It's a credit line, yep.
Yeah. What's their financing model going forward going to look like?
I can't speak very well to what their financing side of it is, but if the credit market unfreezes and thaws out a little bit, I think you'll see a substantial increase in sales.
Yeah, and that's where they are. Anything you want to add, Tim, in terms of what you'd be looking for from those Ford numbers we get in a few minutes?
I think upticks. I'm concerned that Ford, as we know, it never went to the discount window, receiving any funding. And I guess, John, what you're saying is what I'd be looking for, Connell, is continued upticks in sales.
Yeah.
And their credit position, because they have to be in a position through Ford Motor Credit, obviously, to convey loans, to have the cars move off the showroom for their floor plan. In the same vein, I'm very suspect about their liquidity going forward.
Yeah, that's a lot of people's thought. Thanks, John, for coming in on a big day for the autos. We appreciate it. We'll have that Ford number, we think, at the top of Money for Breakfast, so stay tuned for that. That does it for us, though, here, Fox Business Morning.
All right, and Money for Breakfast with Alexis Click coming up next.